There is a peculiar beauty in the paradox of strength found in weakness. It is in the moments when we are most fragile and the weight of life seems unbearable that we discover an enduring truth. Our weakness does not disqualify us, it invites the strength of something far greater. Consider the nature of dependence. In a world that exalts self-reliance and champions unyielding willpower, dependence may appear as a flaw. Yet it is precisely when we acknowledge our inability to carry the burdens alone that we create space for divine power to work through us. In admitting our frailty, we open ourselves to a strength not born of human effort but of eternal grace. Suffering, though unwelcome, often serves as a teacher. Pain strips away pretense and self-sufficiency, revealing the raw and unguarded parts of our souls. But it is here, in the crucible of hardship, that transformation begins. The fires of struggle do not consume us, they refine us. They teach humility, foster compassion, and lead us to seek a power beyond our own. Faith becomes our anchor. When the storm rages and the path ahead is obscured, faith whispers that we are not alone. It reminds us that weakness is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a greater narrative. Faith transforms despair into hope and fear into courage, allowing us to face life's challenges with a quiet confidence rooted in trust. Weakness, then, has a purpose. It is not a mark of failure, but an opportunity for divine intervention. In our struggles, we become relatable to others. Our wounds become testimonies, and our scars serve as maps for those navigating similar paths. Through our weakness, we become vessels of strength, channels through which God's power flows to a weary world. And this transformation is a work of grace. Grace does not merely patch up our imperfections, it transforms them. It turns our brokenness into beauty, our despair into joy, and our weakness into strength. When we surrender our limitations to God, we find that His strength is sufficient not to remove every burden, but to carry us through them. The paradox of strength and weakness. Human life is full of paradoxes, but one of the most profound is the discovery of strength and weakness. At first glance, it appears contradictory. How can frailty, vulnerability, or brokenness be the very thing that gives rise to true strength? Yet this paradox lies at the heart of many spiritual truths, inviting us to rethink what it means to be strong. In a society that glorifies power, self-sufficiency, and control, weakness is often viewed as a defect, a sign of failure or inadequacy. Strength is equated with the ability to overcome every obstacle through sheer force of will or determination. However, this perspective is narrow and incomplete. True strength, the kind that endures and inspires, often has its roots in moments of profound weakness. This is not because weakness is inherently powerful, but because it creates the conditions necessary for divine strength to manifest. When we experience weakness, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, we are stripped of illusions of self-reliance. Our natural inclination is to hide our vulnerabilities, to mask them behind a facade of fitness or competence. But these moments of frailty reveal the limits of human effort and control. They confront us with a reality we often resist, that we are not sufficient in and of ourselves. It is in this confrontation with our own inadequacy that the seeds of transformation are sown. Weakness has a way of humbling us. It dismantles pride, which is often the greatest barrier to receiving help. When we are weak, we are more likely to acknowledge our need for something greater than ourselves. This openness creates a fertile ground for divine intervention. In recognizing our limitations, we make room for the boundless strength of God to work through us. The paradox becomes clear by admitting that we cannot do it all on our own. We access a power far beyond our own abilities. Consider the metaphor of a cracked vessel. A pot with cracks may seem useless for holding water, yet it is precisely through those cracks that light can shine. Similarly, our weaknesses, those cracks in the fabric of our being, become the places where God's strength is most evident. They are not flaws to be hidden, but openings through which divine power flows. This does not mean that weakness is inherently virtuous. Rather, it is the response to weakness that matters. When we surrender our vulnerabilities to God, they are transformed into sources of strength. This paradox is not merely theoretical, it has practical implications for how we live and grow. In times of weakness, we are forced to prioritize what truly matters. Struggles clarify our vision, helping us see what is essential and discard what is superficial. They teach us patience, perseverance, and the value of dependence on others and on God. Weakness in this sense becomes a teacher, imparting lessons that strength alone could never provide. Weakness fosters empathy. When we have experienced fragility ourselves, we are better equipped to understand and support others in their struggles. Our own experiences of weakness more compassionate, more attuned to the pain of those around us. In this way, what initially seems like a personal deficiency becomes a gift that enables us to serve and uplift others. The paradox of strength and weakness also reshapes how we view failure. In moments of failure, when we feel we have fallen short, we often discover the most profound opportunities for growth. Failure humbles us, but it also points us toward grace. It reminds us that our worth is not defined by our accomplishments or abilities, but by the unchanging love and strength of God. Through this lens, failure is no longer a dead end, but a doorway to renewal and transformation. Dependence as a virtue. Dependence is often misunderstood in modern society. It is frequently equated with weakness, immaturity, or failure to stand on one's own. Yet in the spiritual realm, dependence is not a defect, but a profound virtue. To lean on God, particularly in times of trial, is to acknowledge the ultimate source of strength and wisdom, a recognition that brings freedom and power. In a world that idolizes self-reliance, dependence is countercultural. From a young age, we are taught to stand on our own 2 feet and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Independence is praised as the hallmark of strength and maturity. While self-sufficiency has its place, this mindset can lead to a dangerous overconfidence in our own abilities. We begin to believe that we are the masters of our destiny, capable of controlling every aspect of our lives. This illusion, however, often shatters in the face of adversity. When life confronts us with challenges beyond our control, a devastating loss, an illness, or a deep personal failure, our independence feels inadequate. It is in these moments that we are invited to rediscover dependence, not as a weakness, but as a pathway to true strength. To depend on God is to admit that we are not all-powerful, that there are limits to what we can achieve on our own. Far from being a resignation, this admission is an act of profound courage and humility. Dependence on God requires trust, and trust is not always easy. It means relinquishing control and surrendering to a plan we may not fully understand. This is particularly difficult when we are accustomed to relying on our own strength and strategies. However, dependence on God is not about passivity or helplessness. It is an active choice to lean into His promises, believing that His power is made perfect in our weakness. One of the transformative aspects of dependence is that it shifts our focus from ourselves to God. When we rely solely on our abilities, we become the center of our world, burdened by the pressure to succeed and the fear of failure. Dependence liberates us from this self-centered perspective. It reminds us that we are part of a larger story, one authored by a God who is both sovereign and loving. By trusting in Him, we align ourselves with His purposes, gaining a sense of peace and assurance that transcends our circumstances. So, dependence also fosters a deeper relationship with God. Just as a child looks to a parent for guidance, provision, and comfort, our dependence draws us closer to the divine. It teaches us to pray with sincerity and to listen with expectancy. In our dependence, we experience God not as a distant deity, but as an intimate companion, a source of wisdom and strength in every season of life. This kind of dependence is not limited to times of crisis. While it is often adversity that brings us to our knees, the practice of dependence should be a daily habit. Acknowledging our need for God in the small, routine moments of life prepares us for the larger trials that inevitably come. It cultivates a heart posture of humility and gratitude, reminding us that every blessing and every breath is a gift from Him. Dependence on God also transforms our relationships with others. When we recognize our need for God, we become more willing to admit our need for community. We are no longer ashamed to seek help, share our burdens, or lean on the support of others. This openness fosters deeper connections and mutual encouragement as we realize that dependence is a shared human experience. Moreover, our dependence on God equips us to serve others from a place of authenticity and empathy rather than pride or self-interest. Dependence as a virtue teaches us to rest. In a culture that glorifies busyness and achievement, rest often feels indulgent or unproductive. Yet dependence reminds us that our worth is not tied to what we accomplish. By trusting God to sustain us, we can let go of the constant striving and rest in His provision. This rest is not idleness, but a deep soul-refreshing assurance that we are held by a power greater than ourselves. Dependence on God, then, is not a sign of inadequacy, but a profound strength. It allows us to face life's uncertainties with confidence, knowing that we are never alone. It replaces the fragile illusion of self-reliance with the enduring reality of divine support. Through dependence, we discover that true strength lies not in standing apart, but in leaning in on God, on His promises, and on His unchanging love. Redemptive pain. Redemptive pain is a concept that many struggle to understand. Pain in any form is usually perceived as something to be avoided or eliminated. We instinctively recoil from suffering, viewing it as a blemish on the smooth path of life. Yet, the idea of redemptive pain challenges this instinct. It invites us to see pain not just as a negative experience, but as a transformative force that has the potential to bring about growth, healing, and a deeper connection with God. In the face of hardship, we often question why pain exists or why we must endure it. The suffering we experience, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, can feel like a punishment or an injustice. Yet redemptive pain reminds us that God has the ability to bring good out of even the most difficult circumstances. While pain in itself is not good, the transformation that it can bring is. It becomes redemptive when we allow it to shape us, refine us, and draw us closer to God. The notion of redemptive pain is rooted in the understanding that suffering has a purpose. We are not merely passive victims of life's trials, rather, we are invited to engage with them in a way that produces something meaningful. Just as gold is refined by fire, our character is often purified through the trials we face. These experiences, painful as they are, strip away the impurities of pride, selfishness, and self-reliance, leaving behind a more humble and compassionate version of ourselves. In this way, pain can act as a purifier, shaping us into the people we are meant to be. One of the most powerful aspects of redemptive pain is its ability to cultivate empathy. When we suffer, we come to understand the pain of others in a deeper and more authentic way. We are no longer distanced from the struggles of those around us because we have walked a similar path. Our wounds become places of connection where we can share in the burdens of others and offer comfort. In this sense, pain becomes redemptive not just for ourselves but for the world around us. It teaches us compassion, enabling us to reach out to others with love and understanding rather than judgment or indifference. Pain also has the potential to deepen our relationship with God. In moments of suffering, we are often driven to prayer, seeking comfort and understanding from a higher source. It is in these moments of vulnerability that we experience God's presence in profound ways. When everything else is stripped away, we find that God's love and grace are more than sufficient to sustain us. This connection with God, forged in the crucible of pain, can lead to a deeper sense of peace and trust, even in the midst of the most difficult trials. Redemptive pain transforms our understanding of hope. It reminds us that suffering is not the final word. While we may not understand why we experience certain trials, we can trust that God is working in and through them for our good. This hope is not based on a denial of pain, but on the belief that God can bring light even into the darkest moments. It allows us to face suffering with the assurance that it is not meaningless and that in time God will use it to bring about something beautiful. In the Bible, we see countless examples of redemptive pain. Consider the story of Joseph, whose life was marked by betrayal, imprisonment, and hardship. Yet through his suffering, Joseph was able to save an entire nation from famine. His pain was not wasted, but became the vehicle for God's greater plan. Similarly, the ultimate example of redemptive pain is the suffering of Jesus Christ. Through his crucifixion, the greatest injustice in history became the means of salvation for all humanity. In both of these examples, pain was not the end, but the beginning of something far greater. Redemptive pain also teaches us perseverance. When we face trials, we are often tempted to give up or to seek ways to escape the discomfort. However, when we understand that pain has a purpose, we are able to endure it with greater strength and resilience. We recognize that suffering, though difficult, is temporary and that it will eventually give way to healing and restoration. This perspective enables us to press forward with hope, knowing that our pain is not pointless but part of a larger journey of growth and transformation. Redemptive pain helps us to redefine success. In a world that often measures success by external achievements or comfort, redemptive pain shifts the focus to inner growth and spiritual maturity. The true value of our lives is not found in how much we avoid suffering, but in how we respond to it. By allowing our pain to refine us, we grow in character, wisdom, and faith. In this way, suffering becomes a powerful tool for spiritual development, helping us to become more Christ-like in our thoughts, words, and actions. The role of faith. Faith is often described as the cornerstone of spiritual life, yet its significance is sometimes underestimated, particularly in the face of overwhelming circumstances. Faith in its purest form is not merely a belief in abstract truths, it is a deeply personal and active trust in God's character, promises, and sovereignty. The role of faith becomes most evident when we find ourselves in moments of weakness, uncertainty, and hardship. It is during these times that faith proves itself as a powerful source of strength and resilience. At its core, faith is a confident assurance that God is who He says He is and that He will do what He has promised. This kind of faith does not depend on our circumstances or our own abilities. It is not swayed by the turbulence of life but remains steadfast because it is anchored in the unchanging nature of God. In times of weakness, faith shifts our focus away from our inadequacies and directs our attention toward God's infinite power and grace. It allows us to trust that even when we cannot see the way forward, God is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating all things for our good. Faith is not a denial of reality. It does not ignore the difficulties we face or the challenges that loom before us. Rather, faith is the lens through which we view those challenges. It helps us see beyond the immediate temporal struggles and reminds us that there is a greater reality at play, the reality of God's presence, power, and promises. When we are weak, faith allows us to acknowledge our vulnerability without succumbing to despair. It gives us the strength to face the trials of life with the confidence that God is with us and that He will never abandon us. One of the most powerful aspects of faith is its ability to provide peace in the midst of chaos. When we place our trust in God, we can experience a peace that transcends understanding, even when everything around us is crumbling. This peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of God's comfort and assurance. It is a peace that steadies our hearts and minds, allowing us to rest in the knowledge that God is in control and that nothing can separate us from His love. Faith also enables us to endure and persevere. In times of weakness, it is easy to become discouraged or overwhelmed by the weight of our circumstances. However, faith empowers us to keep moving forward, even when we feel as though we have nothing left to give. Faith gives us the strength to press on, knowing that God is at work in us and through us, even when we cannot see immediate results. It is through faith that we find the courage to continue, not because we are strong in ourselves, but because we trust that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. Faith opens our hearts to God's provision. When we are weak, we often feel as though we are lacking in some way, whether it be strength, wisdom, or resources. Faith reminds us that God is the ultimate provider. It assures us that He will meet our needs according to His riches in glory, even when we do not know how or when that provision will come. In moments of scarcity, faith allows us to trust that God will provide exactly what we need, whether it is the strength to endure, the wisdom to navigate a difficult situation, or the comfort to heal a broken heart. The role of faith is also seen in how it transforms our perspective on time. We live in a culture that values immediate results and quick fixes. However, faith teaches us to trust in God's timing, even when it feels as though nothing is happening. When we are weak and waiting for relief, faith reassures us that God's timing is perfect. He is not bound by the constraints of time as we are, and He is working out His plan in ways that we cannot always see or understand. Faith gives us the patience to wait for God's perfect timing and the confidence that He will never be late in fulfilling His promises. Faith strengthens our hope. Hope and faith are intertwined, and faith is the foundation upon which hope is built. When we are in moments of weakness, it is easy to lose hope, to feel as though things will never improve. However, faith gives us hope that the future is bright, not because of our circumstances, but because of God's promises. Faith allows us to look beyond the present moment and see the bigger picture, the ultimate victory and restoration that God has in store for us. With faith, we can endure trials because we know that they are temporary and that God is working all things together for our good. Faith also plays a pivotal role in how we interact with others during times of weakness. When we are weak, it can be tempting to isolate ourselves, to withdraw from relationships, and to handle things on our own. However, faith teaches us that we are not meant to walk through life alone. By trusting in God's provision, we can also trust that He has placed people around us to support, encourage, and pray for us. Faith opens our hearts to the community of believers and reminds us that we are part of something greater than ourselves. Faith is transformative. As we continue trusting God through our weaknesses, our faith grows stronger. The more we rely on God in times of difficulty, the more we experience His faithfulness and presence. Over time, this deepens our trust in Him, building a foundation of faith that can withstand even the most difficult storms. The role of faith in our lives is not just to help us survive hardship, but to enable us to thrive through it. With faith, we can face life's challenges with hope, perseverance, and the assurance that God is working all things together for our good and His glory. Strength through surrender. Strength through surrender is one of the most counterintuitive concepts in both spiritual and everyday life. The world often tells us that strength comes from assertiveness, control, and the ability to dominate our circumstances. We are conditioned to believe that to be strong, we must maintain power over our situations, our emotions, and even our relationships. However, true strength is often found in the very act of surrender and letting go of our need for control and yielding to a higher power. This concept is rooted in the paradoxical truth that in surrendering ourselves to God, we tap into a strength that far surpasses our own. Surrendering does not mean weakness or defeat. Rather, it is an act of recognizing our limitations and choosing to trust in God's greater wisdom and power. When we surrender, we acknowledge that we are not in control, but God is. This is not a resignation to passivity, but an active choice to place our burdens and concerns in His hands, trusting that His plans for us are better than our own. By letting go of our attempts to manipulate and control our circumstances, we open ourselves to a power greater than ourselves. In doing so, we experience a strength that we could never generate on our own. We are naturally inclined to want to solve our problems on our own and to prove our ability to handle life's challenges. However, this desire for control often leads to exhaustion, frustration, and even failure. The more we try to control, the more we realize how limited our power is. Surrendering, on the other hand, invites us to let go of the burden of self-sufficiency and to lean on God's wisdom and strength. This act of humility, recognizing that we do not have all the answers, is the first step toward true spiritual strength. Surrender also means releasing the outcomes. We may have a clear vision of what we want or what we think should happen, but life does not always unfold according to our plans. Surrendering means trusting that God knows what is best for us even when we don't understand the path ahead. It involves letting go of our expectations and being willing to accept whatever God has in store for us. This trust is not easy, especially when we face uncertainty or difficulty. However, it is precisely in these moments that surrender can lead to profound growth. By relinquishing our desire to control the future, we are free to receive whatever God has planned, knowing that His will is always for our good, even when it looks different from what we imagined.